Hey everyone, it's Blake here with ChessPathways.com, and today we're going to be talking about the Dutch defense. The Dutch defense is a response to the queen's pawn opening, and after white begins the game here with pawn to d4, black plays here f5, really imbalancing the position, taking this e4 square under control, and trying to develop this knight behind this pawn instead of blocking in this pawn here on f7. Of course, there's always a downside to exposing the king's weak diagonal here, this short diagonal to the king, that the minor pieces cannot block, and we're going to see how white can try to exploit this. But if you're looking to get a really imbalanced, double-edged game against the queen's pawn opening, the Dutch defense might be for you. The first line I'm going to show is called the Leningrad variation of the Dutch defense, and that's where black fianchettos the dark squared bishop here. They put it on g7, where it's going to be a good defender of the king after black castles, and also exert a lot of pressure here down the diagonal, and black will later try to expand in the center, possibly by playing e5. So let's take a look at how this might look. White can play g3 here. White will often adopt a fianchetto setup against the Dutch defense. Knight f6, bishop g2, g6. Again, black's going to fianchetto this bishop. Knight to f3, bishop g7. Both sides get castled. White plays c4 and grabs some more space here in the center. Black plays d6 to open up the other bishop, and one of black's plans might be to play queen to e8, and then e5, grabbing the full center here. Black doesn't want to play the more typical rook e8 to achieve this goal, trying to play e5, because this rook's actually well placed here on the f-file, because this f-pawn is advanced, and black would like to have some firepower behind the f-pawn and the e-pawn here, after black puts that e-pawn in the center. So white can play knight c3. Black can play queen e8 here. Black will sometimes play c6 to stop the idea we're about to see. This also helps to kind of blunt the bishop here. It also takes away the best square from the knight, though, possibly. So it's kind of double-edged. Queen e8's the more popular move, though. And now, white might try to stop black from playing e5 by playing d5 here, stopping e5 because of en passant, and also taking away the c6 square from the knight. Now, black has sometimes tried playing e5 here anyway, but they're not really going to get the position they were looking for after white takes en passant, bishop takes e6, and now knight d4, attacking the bishop, attacking the b7 pawn here, and black is either going to have to play bishop c8, or else part with their bishop pair after c6, knight takes e6, and that's not what a lot of players are really looking for here with black. So instead, after d5, black sometimes just changes plans, says, okay, I'm not going to try for e5 right away, but now this c5 square could be a good outpost for my knight. So black often here plays a5, stopping white from playing b4 and taking more space on the queen side, and black can follow up with knight a6 and knight to c5. The result is an imbalanced game with definitely an unusual pawn structure here, and both sides are definitely going to have their chances to play for a win. Definitely what a Dutch defense player is looking for when they play this opening. So that was the Leningrad. Another form of the Dutch defense is called the Stonewall Dutch, and that's going to involve black playing e6 and d5, really committing all these pawns to light squares and getting a very firm grip here of the e4 square. So let's see what this might look like. g3, knight f6, bishop g2, e6, c4, and now black plays d5, the characteristic move of the Stonewall Dutch. Knight f3, c6, castles, and bishop d6. So what's going on in this position? Black has very good control over the e4 square. That will often find itself home to a knight. Black can play knight e4 later, sometimes bringing the other knight over to f6 to take that other knight's place. Black can go ahead and castle to the king's side, and black can try to get a big attack on the king's side if white's not careful. But the downside of this is black's pawn structure is very rigid. Black has committed to giving up control of the e5 square. Black can never again control that square with a pawn. And I've even seen games where white maneuvers this b1 knight to d3 so that white can play knight e5 with a knight supported by another knight, and it can be very hard for black to ever evict that knight from the e5 square, where it's going to be a permanent thorn in black's side. The other big downside is this light squared bishop is now very bad. Again, a very rigid pawn structure, all the pawns on light squares. That's bad news for the light squared bishop. But black has ways to try to deal with this. Sometimes black plays a later bishop d7, bishop e8, and bishop h5 after black castles. But of course, this takes a lot of time. So those are the ideas. Let's translate that into some moves. White's most popular move here is to play b3, with the simple aim of trying to trade off dark squared bishops with bishop a3. Again, from white's perspective, it's going to be all about these bishops. If they can trade off dark squared bishops, black's left with only a bad bishop here on c8 compared to white's bishop on g2, and white's hoping that that will bring them a long-term advantage. Just to mention a couple other white plans to take on the Stonewall, sometimes white will close the center with c5 and launch a big pawn storm on the queen side with b4 and a4 and b5, trying to make use of their extra space over there. Sometimes white will try to play f3 and e4 and really blow open the center and exploit this backwards e-pawn after the e-file opens up. So those are just a couple ways white tries to play against this setup, but in this particular position b3 is very popular. Black will usually play queen e7, stopping bishop a3 for the time being. Again, always good to keep an eye on what your opponent's trying to do. Here black asked themselves what white's trying to do after white played b3, and they spent the time to prevent white's positional threat of playing bishop a3. And now white can either give up on that idea and just put this bishop on b2, or white sometimes even plays a4, just letting this rook help out control the a3 square, and renewing the threat of bishop a3. After a4, I pulled together a sample line here. Let's say black plays a5, trying to grab some space of their own over there on the queen side. White plays bishop a3 to exchange off these bishops. Black gets castled. And now white implements the plan I kind of foreshadowed earlier, bringing this knight to the d3 square. Knight c2, b6, and now knight to e1. Again, heading to d3, and then white's going to be able to throw a knight into e5. Bishop b7, knight d3, knight a6, knight e5. So it looks like white has a really good positional grip here on the center, trying to punish black for really exposing this e5 square. So now black wants to open up the queen side here by playing c5, so that black can get his fair share of the play. All the black pieces here actually stand pretty reasonably. This bishop's not too terrible anymore. This diagonal might get opened up at some moment, and this bishop could exchange off for its counterpart. And both the knights here are reasonably placed. The position is probably roughly equal. So we've looked at two of the main lines there, the Leningrad variation and the Stonewall variation. Let's consider some other ways white can play against the Dutch defense. One is the Staunton Gambit by playing e4 here on move 2, sacrificing a pawn. Just trying to accelerate white's development, and possibly trying to exploit the somewhat weakened position here of the black king because of the missing f-pawn here. After f takes e4, knight to c3, black will usually play knight to f6 and defend this pawn for now, and white will usually play bishop g5 here, threatening to remove the defender of this pawn, and win it back with knight takes e4. White's tried some other moves here, including the very spectacular g4, just trying to drive this knight away with g5, but it turns out that black can simply play the calm h6 here, and black's doing alright here. After this d-pawn moves, this g4 pawn might even be a target. So after bishop g5, black has a couple ways to play here. Black could just play e6, trying to open some lines of development and just give this pawn back. Now, of course, the knight is pinned, so white would be able to take here with knight takes e4, and after bishop e7 breaking the pin, white will often give up the bishop here instead of the knight and play bishop takes f6, and knight to f3. It's almost reminiscent of that line in the French defense where white tries a very similar idea. Just to show it, going back here, e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, d takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop e7, and now bishop takes f6 instead of knight takes f6. And black ends up with the pair of bishops, but it's hard to dislodge this knight here on e4, and white can try to very quickly castle queenside and play for a big attack on the kingside. In fact, there's only one difference between this position and the one from the Dutch defense. If I click here on the Dutch defense line, the only difference is that black's f-pawn moves to the d-file, and black's missing the f-pawn instead of the d-pawn, as they are in the French defense. White tends to actually score pretty well in this position. Despite black having the pair of bishops for now, white is likely to get a lead in development, and white has a space advantage in the center for the time being. So black has an alternative here after bishop g5. Black does not have to play e6 and give the pawn back right away. Knight c6 is also sometimes tried. And the lines here can get pretty complicated. If white tries to win their pawn back right away, then we get to see the point of this knight c6 move. For example, if white plays bishop takes f6, e takes f6, knight takes e4, now black can play queen e7, pinning this knight to the king, and if white were to play queen e2 here, breaking this pin, now the d4 pawn turns out to be hanging, and this knight here is doing a great job here stopping white from playing that queen e2 move. So in light of that, white will usually respond to knight c6 by playing d5 here, attacking the knight, and a sample line might continue knight e5, queen d4, knight f7, counterattacking this bishop here on g5. Bishop takes f6, e takes f6, knight takes e4, f5, just trying to drive that knight away. and now knight g3 and g6, and we see another point of the knight here on f7. It defends the rook. After white castles long, black can go ahead and give this check, bishop h6, f4, and now they castle, planning to possibly drop this bishop back to g7, where it will be very nice on this long diagonal. Black has scored pretty well from this particular position. So that's one other option white has against the Dutch, the Staunton Gambit. There's also this unique move, bishop g5, almost Trompowsky style here against the Dutch defense. And this move kind of has a funny point. If black plays h6, trying to put the question here to this bishop, the bishop can just go to h4, and it looks like the bishop's getting trapped here with g5 and f4, but if black were to play g5, white simply ignores that bishop being under attack and plays e3, threatening queen h5 checkmate. This position's been reached a small handful of times. Black has to play knight f6 here to stop queen h5, and now after bishop g3, black can't trap this bishop, and we just end up with this very imbalanced position. Black has a lot of space here on the king side, but their king might be pretty exposed. One interesting option black has against this bishop g5 system is to opt for almost a hybrid of the Leningrad Dutch and the Stonewall Dutch by playing g6 and d5. Knight c3 and now d5, and one game I found continued e3, bishop g7, h4. White's trying to exploit this early g6 by launching this h-pawn into a pawn storm here, trying to open lines and get to the black king. c6, bishop d3, and now bishop e6. Usually you don't want to block in your central pawns with pieces, but here black wants to make sure this bishop gets developed before they lock it away with e6, which makes a lot of sense in this position. There's not really any other piece that's being restricted by this e-pawn on e7, so black decides that they can keep it there for now. Knight f3, knight to d7, h5, knight g to f6, and white succeeds in opening up the h-file here and stopping black from castling kingside, but black's position remains pretty solid here, and the position is just about equal. Thank you very much for watching. Please make sure you visit chesspathways.com. I'll put a link down in the description and get signed up on that site. It's completely free, only takes 5 seconds, and I will send you a free move-by-move guide to chess thinking when you sign up. You'll also get access to all of our exclusive content and contests. I'm trying to help more chess players become masters, hopefully in a fraction of the time that it took me. Thanks, and I'll see you there.